Well, he's one of the world's most controversial leaders, and he's about to stir up a lot more controversy. Well, this Tuesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be addressing a joint session of the U.S. Congress. Against protocol, he was invited by the Republican Speaker of the House, John Boehner. Now, such an invitation is an end run around the White House, clearly intended as a slap in the face of President Barack Obama. But there may be more here than just partisan power plays. Both Netanyahu and Boehner seem determined to throw a wrench into U.S. efforts to reach a deal with Iran over its nuclear program. But perhaps the bigger issue here is a precedent being set. A foreign head of state getting involved in American party politics and apparently using them to his own advantage. After all, Netanyahu is just 2 weeks away from elections at home back in Israel. Well, Fishman is an assistant professor of history at Brooklyn College. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Should Netanyahu have accepted this invitation in the first place, in your opinion?
Absolutely not, I think. And I think inside in Israel also, many forces are coming together condemning him for going against President Obama's wishes.
Yeah, in fact, about 72% of the people, from what I understand, at least one poll, favor talks on nuclear, the talks. I'm going to get to that a little bit later. But they oppose this visit a lot. Even, of course, the opposition party obviously opposes this. And I'm just wondering how this might fare with him back home in his own elections. This could backfire on him.
Yeah, well, this morning, even a group of former Army officers and reserve officers came out and condemned the visit. I think it's really important is that Israelis do not want Israel to become a partisan issue in Washington, and that's exactly what's happening. So I think in some senses that this is backfiring on Netanyahu. Now we have to make clear that Netanyahu is de-escalating the tension or working to de-escalate the tension. But I don't think he's going to succeed. The mudslinging will continue between both administrations if it does not go right.
Well, of course, he's supposed to be speaking to a joint session of Congress here. There are some Democrats that say they will not participate in this. As a matter of fact, Joe Biden is scheduling, he has a trip abroad, so he's not going to be there. And I'm sure that's certainly sending a message from the White House, although they really haven't said anything officially about this yet.
Yeah, the message is clear that they're not interested in him speaking, and the message is also clear that Democrats aren't interested. He will be meeting with Harry Reid after the Senate House leader,
as well as Mitch McConnell.
Exactly. But I think the overall, especially the attacks also by some different organizations, Jewish organizations, on Susan Rice recently has escalated the tension, and her going to speak to AIPAC. So we're really going to have to see how this plays out in the next few days.
Well,
For Netanyahu, it doesn't look good.
Well, Susan Rice did say in an interview that she thought that his trip would be, I'm quoting her words, destructive.
Destructive, that's right.
I'm just wondering how much does that hurt the Obama administration and why they have to backtrack on any of that, because obviously it isn't destructive, as most people think.
I think for the Obama administration, I mean, they're sort of pushed in the corner also. What can they do, or what kind of leverage can they have, juxtaposed vis-a-vis Netanyahu? Not much. Let's face it, that the Obama administration really has had a failed Middle East policy in general. So there's not much maneuvering room in the Middle East itself. Having said that, though, we know that the biggest problem is that Netanyahu is not offering any alternative to the peace talks with Iran. Or the nuclear talks with Iran. So overall, I think Obama could come out ahead on this.
Okay, the end game here, from what we seem to know at this point, is the focus quite clearly on the nuclear talks now with the P5 plus one nation, that plus one meaning Germany. But before we get into that discussion, I also want to talk about politically what that does in terms of the relationships between the United States and Israel. Some are saying, and even over in Israel, that this will strain and harm relations for some time to come. Do you think that's the case with the President Barack Obama only having, less than a year, 2 years in office?
Yeah, I actually don't think that it's going to have really any long-term effects on relations. I think the trend towards de-escalation is going to continue. However, what might come out of this is actually that Israel's policy, or Israeli policy, is put to test in the United States. We know that the peace process has really been, put in stalemate or, frozen in the last 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Something has to change. And the fact that people are starting to question Israeli policy, that might be something positive that comes out of it. Okay. That this is a partisan issue, and this is up to debate in the United States. I think that's very important here.
Okay, well, we'll see. The winds of change, they are indeed blowing right now. The Netanyahu visit comes as negotiators try yet again to come to terms with Iran Iran over its nuclear program, as we were talking about. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has been holding high-level meetings, and this week, the six powers involved in negotiations with Tehran will gather in Switzerland. The deadline for an agreement is now March 31st, but we've seen these deadlines come and go before, but this time perhaps it could be different. There are reports progress is being made. Well, joining the discussion now, along with Professor Fishman, we have Jamal Abdi from the National Iranian-American Council. Thanks for joining us. In your mind, what has changed here? They're saying there perhaps may be some progress.
Well, the key issue that has changed is actually that there's been a compromise on centrifuge numbers. Iran has apparently accepted something that is more along the lines of what the U.S. has been driving towards as far as reducing the number of operational centrifuges for the first phase of the deal. My understanding is that would likely require Iran to reduce and cap its centrifuge numbers for the first 10 years of a deal, and then would be able to start expanding in the final 5 years of that deal. So that's really what the difference has been in terms of the technicalities.
You know, I want a further discussion also about these talks here. We're talking about the P5. That's, of course, the UN Security Council, China, Russia, Germany. Well, not Germany, France and Britain. Germany being the +1 here, pulling together on this. But, you know, Mr. Abdi, there seems to be so much focus on the U.S. What about the other countries involved in these discussions here? How come they're not getting as much weight put on them, at least as far as we're seeing in the media, when it comes to giving Iran nuclear capability, as I'll put it that way?
Well, I think there's been less focus on those countries because it has been the U.S. that has been driving the conversation. And I don't want to say that the U.S. has been, dictating the terms of the P5+1, but it certainly has been playing a leadership role. I think a lot of the countries have looked at what is the U.S. willing to accept. This has been a 30-year standoff between Iran and the United States, not necessarily the European countries who were brought on to the sanctions and pressure policy by the United States. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. I think it's really significant that you have the European countries, and then you have Russia and China, and you have the U.S. all in agreement here on what needs to get done. That is a really important achievement. And that's why, with all of the drama now in Washington, it's problematic because, these six countries have managed to get on the same page. Now you have Netanyahu, and you have 535 members of Congress who all want to suddenly be a part of these negotiations. And that's probably a few too many negotiators.
Professor Fishman, I want to bring you in on this discussion again here. Some are saying, some conservatives at least are saying, that this move by Netanyahu is an act of desperation. That there's no doubt in their minds that at some point in time here that Iran will have nuclear weapon capability. Do you believe that? Do you think that it will really actually go down that road? And do you think that's exactly why Netanyahu is here, putting politics aside?
Well, I think it's almost impossible to put politics aside. If Netanyahu really wished to speak to Congress, he could have done this behind closed doors. The fact that this is going public is political, and I think that's a major pitfall for Netanyahu on that side. Okay, having said that, Netanyahu and other groups are not offering any other alternative. So yesterday Josh Earnest said that what are the alternatives? Only military. So I think most Israelis also are supporting the United States in their negotiations, and I think United States has always supported Israel. So why not now?
I want to ask both of you this question. Mr. Abdi, I want to start with you. Netanyahu and others are saying that a 10-year freeze of Iran getting enough material to make a nuclear bomb is inadequate. Do you believe that's the case? What is your opinion on this?
I mean, the question is inadequate compared to what? What's the alternative here? 10 years. A 10-year, cap on Iran's program would be something that nothing to this point has been able to achieve. No amount of sanctions, no amount of threats of war. And when Netanyahu talks about what his preferred alternative, if he's willing to go there, you talk about Israeli strikes that could set Iran's program back by 6 months. United States strikes that could set Iran's program back maybe 1 to 2 years. And in both those scenarios, that then drives Iran to kick out inspectors and race to a weapon. We're talking about 10 years here. No other option on the table achieves that. And so I think that this is really clearly, this is desperation. This is seeing the best option finally materialize and Netanyahu unwilling to cope with the fact that this means that the standoff between the U.S. and Iran may finally be unwinding, and Iran may be brought into the fold as far as who the players in the region are that the U.S. is willing to work with. And that, not any nuclear weapons capability, is really, I think, what Netanyahu is concerned with and is aiming to dismantle here.
Professor Fishman.
Yes, there's also many military experts in Israel that don't agree with Netanyahu. Remember, Netanyahu's party has only 21, will only have 22, 23 seats in the upcoming elections. Meaning this is up to debate also in Israel among the experts, also military experts, with many supporting the United States peace talks.
Do you actually think, we've got less than a minute left here, I just want to get this in, that this could possibly damage Netanyahu's possibilities for being reelected? Has it gotten that serious? Because I don't see that being the case.
You know, Israelis are looking more at domestic issues. This is on the sideline. This might up him 1 or 2 seats or bring him down 1 or 2 seats. It's not a major playing, game in the elections. If you look at the greater picture, this is really a minor issue on the minds of Israelis.
Well, you're not talking about the nuclear talks now.
No, not the nuclear talks.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that most Israelis usually vote towards domestic issues, housing prices, economy, things like this. These pictures. If you look at with Iran, yes, it's on the minds of Israelis, but also feeding their children is probably much more on their minds.
Okay, just like most human beings.
Yeah,
Professor
exactly.
Fishman, thank you for joining us.
Thank
Jamal
you.
Abdi from Washington, D.C. Sir, thank you so much for your insight.
Sure thing.
Okay.